Welcome in everyone, Nick Borgia here for Devil's Digest. Alongside me is our publisher, Hode Rubino, and we just made it through the midway point of Arizona State's spring football practices. A lot to catch up on and talk about for this week, Hode, but first I want to start with this. They often mention that defenses start ahead of offenses in these spring football practices, and I just want to hear your take. Is that the case with Arizona State football this year?
Yeah, absolutely, Nick. I think that's the take, and I think you have the objective reason where the defensive coordinator, Donnie Henderson, was obviously the defensive backs coach last year, so you definitely have that sense of continuity. This defense isn't a whole lot different than it was in 2021, and as we know, the numbers that this ASU defense put up last season was one of the best this century, so it's really, if it's not broken, don't fix it type of situation for the Sun Devils. Obviously, you still have a guy like Marv Lewis as a defensive consultant. His fingerprints are still all over this defense, so really, you have that continuity in the scheme, which I really feel does help the defense. Obviously, there's also a lot of talent, as we mentioned, in the front seven. Even though you have some key players, especially on the defensive line, that haven't practiced now and will be limited at best, if that, for the rest of the spring. Jermaine Lola and Nessa Silvera, Travez Moore, B.J. Green. You still have a lot of talent coming back in that defensive line. You look at the two defensive ends, Mike Matusin and Anthony Cooper, and then the two players playing inside TJ Pesafe and Omar Norman Lott. Those are players that played a lot of football in 2021. So even though you have players such as I mentioned earlier that are still sidelined and will definitely be starters or maybe in some cases at worst in the two deep, you still have so much talent coming back that I really feel that this allows the front four to play really, really well. And then you have linebackers, again, all established players. When you look at the starting lineup, Carl Sole, Merlin Robinson, Eric Gentry. And even you look at the second-team linebackers, Kelly McCullough, Will Schaefer, Connor Sola, again, all players that played a lot of football last year. So, again, you really can't say enough about how well this front seven is playing in the spring just because you have that experience. And, again, the continuity of the scheme. Now, when you look at the defensive back group, I think that things are maybe coming more or less into focus, or really settling down, I should say. You have the two starting cornerbacks, Tamarcus Davis and Keon Markham. I think they're pretty established, Nick. I wouldn't be surprised when the season opener rolls by that those are going to be your two starting corners. But at safety, as we mentioned last time you and I talked, picture's a little interesting because we're wondering when the two transfers, Chris Edmonds and Corey Bethley, are going to make it into the first or second team. And sure enough, that's exactly what we've seen in the last couple of sessions. You have a first team safety, Keon Markham, and Chris Edmonds, and I think that's a really good-looking, physically tall tandem of safeties over there for the Sun Devils. Corey Bethley and Elijah Gamage are the second-team safety right now. At second-team cornerback, we have Mason Williams and Isaiah Johnson, and a lot of folks were wondering when Johnson, who was the highest-rated recruit in the 2020 recruiting class, was really going to make his mark. And I think, Nick, it really hurt him that he wasn't here last spring. He had to wait until fall camp to arrive. But right now, he's playing just like the talented cornerback a lot of us thought he would be when he first arrived in Tempe. So I think slowly but surely, this secondary is really settling in terms of it's too deep. From what I'm hearing from people around the team, it's not a secondary that right now is wowing you, but on the other hand, I think that also it definitely is a secondary that has a lot of room to grow. And I think also that maybe there are some issues on the offense that maybe right now are someone making the secondary look good, and I would hope this secondary would really be challenged more and more as spring practice progresses, so we really can see what the true level of play of this back four for the Sun Devils are. But all in all, again, just to go back to your earlier point, yes, the defense is ahead of the offense, and I think there are definitely some objective factors, like I said, with the continuity of the scheme with a lot of returning talent. But let's be fair, there are some issues on offense, which I think also helping the defense play as well as they have the first couple of weeks here.
Now, we've mentioned this many times. As we know, there's a pretty heated quarterback competition going on within the offense. Do you have an update with that, Hode?
I think the update is that not a whole lot changed since you and I last talked. I think the reps, whether it's the sessions that are open to the media or the sessions that's not open to the media, it's still pretty much an even 50-50 distribution between Trent Bourget, the returning quarterback, the most experienced returning quarterback, I should say, on the team, and Paul Tyson, the transfer from Alabama. I think they also have an issue where there is some drop off between the first team and the second team wide receiver group. So whoever on any given practice actually gets more snaps with the second team than he does with the first team, I think sometimes also that can really affect the perception of this quarterback or that quarterback playing well or not playing well. I think what's interesting over here with the ASU offense is that we know they're going to be a lot under center, and I think that may really benefit a guy like Paul Tyson, all 6'5" of him, having 6 inches of a height difference over a guy like Trent Bourget, because that's when really, having clear passing sights, if you will, for your aerial targets, really becomes a very, very important factor. And I'm wondering if that's going to be more and more of a staple of this offensive scheme. Does that maybe by default give a guy like Paul Tyson an advantage? We also know that the tight ends are really going to be involved a lot in the passing game. Again, does a physical quarterback like Paul Tyson have the advantage in that case in terms of being able to deliver the ball with more consistency to taller aerial targets without passes being bad at the line of scrimmage? That's something that's really interesting to see. But I just want to make it clear that I don't think any one quarterback has a clear advantage over the second one. And I also think that at the end of spring practice, we're not going to hear Glenn Thomas, the offensive coordinator, or Herm Edwards, the head coach, really make an announcement that this quarterback or that quarterback is actually number one quarterback going into fall camp. I mean, I've been covering this team for 22 years, and I don't remember a quarterback battle that started in spring practice ending at the spring game. So this is going to be an ongoing battle. Right now, I think the distribution is really 50-50 between Tyson and Bourget, but I think that maybe Tyson might have some elements that are going to work in his favor, but that is something that also has to be proven between now and the spring game on April 9th.
And beyond the quarterbacks, are there any other compelling parts of the offense that you think we should be paying attention to?
Well, I think you have the running game that obviously has just huge shoes to fill in with the losses of Rashad White and Chip Trayanum. And I think that Daniel Ngata and Xavier Valade, the transfer from Wyoming, are really doing a good job so far. We know this offense is still an offense that's going to rely more on the run than the pass. I don't think it's going to be any surprise whatsoever to look at the season-ending stats of 2022 and see that the distribution between run and pass was somewhere in the neighborhood of 60-40 in favor of the run. But I think these running backs that definitely can shoulder the load. I've been hearing some really good reviews from the segments of practice that you and I are not able to be in. So I'm not going to say that this running back group collectively is just going to blow away the numbers from last year, but I definitely don't think the drop-off is going to be as dramatic as some people think it's going to be. And if the running game is doing well, I think that's a real good indication the offensive line is performing well. I know Ben Scott is one player who definitely had a lot of false starts and holding penalties to his detriment in 2021 when he did play at right tackle, sometimes even at right guard. But I think at center he's really settled down, maybe to the best position that does really suit him. And more than anything, Nick, I really think that the snaps between him and no matter which quarterback is behind him, no matter if the quarterback is under center or just in the shotgun formation, really not hearing and seeing a lot of botched center quarterback exchanges. And Donovan West, who we do know did have a thumb surgery in the offseason. One reason why he did miss the bowl game against Wisconsin. The snap exchange between him and Jaden Daniels last year was definitely an issue. Now you can talk about also the thumb issue that was bothering Donovan West as being an objective reason why he was having issues, but nonetheless, I just feel that for this early in spring to see that center quarterback exchange really go without a hitch, I think is really encouraging, because I just feel like if your center plays well, that can definitely have a positive domino effect, if you will, for the rest of the offensive line. We talked about two position battles that I think are still ongoing on the offensive line. At left tackle, we saw Emmett Bowl, the Division II transfer from a school in South Dakota, really battling Isaiah Glass for those first team reps at the left tackle. I think Glass is doing a good job really holding ball off, but I think that position is far from being settled so far. and at right guard, I'm really curious again to see if Spencer Lovell can hold off Chris Martinez, because as we mentioned in our last video, Nick, Chris Martinez comes from an established San Diego State program who had an outstanding season last year, and I'm not going to say it's a head scratcher to see him on the second team, and maybe it's just an issue of just a newcomer trying to get used to everything over here in his new college. But still, the Chris Martinez to be second team at right guard, to me at least, it's somewhat a surprise. But maybe by the time you and I have our next video, Nick, we could see like a whole different picture in that regard. I think the tight end group continues to be really impressive with a guy like Messiah Swinson, the Missouri transfer. He shows that he can definitely be a really competent aerial target. Case Hatch, the fullback, has been really limited due to injury in the spring. So we're actually seeing Jalen Conyers, the most experienced tight end, returning from last year, playing some of that H-back role, which is kind of interesting. But again, I think this tight end group is really going to surprise a lot of people once the season rolls by. Obviously, their blocking is going to be just as important as the receiving capabilities, but I think as a whole, the receiving capabilities of this group are going to be a pleasant surprise, at least in my opinion, really when it's all said and done. And I think when it comes to the wide receivers, Nick, that don't be surprised. And I said this to my subscribers a couple of months ago, that ASU is still going to be in the market to add one or two wide receivers from the transfer portal. Not so much to unseat starters like Ricky Parasol or LV Buckley Shelton. And Buckley Shelton, by the way, has still been very limited, and I think also that affects the play of the wide receiver group as a whole. But I think that some transfer additions can really just elevate the level of depth of this group. Don't forget that with the plethora of newcomers almost on each and every position on this team, wide receiver is one group that did not get a transfer portal audition, that did not get a recruit either from the high school or from the junior college ranks playing right now in spring practice. So I think that's a group that the offensive staff is going to take a close and hard look at, see exactly what type of wide receiver they need to shore up the depth. And don't be surprised if there'll be some additions between now and June and July. So that's really just a synopsis of the offense. I think that it is definitely going through some growing pains with a quarterback competition that's still unsettled, with an offensive scheme that is definitely, and understandably, I should say, really taking time for all the players to get used to. You still have some position battles going on here or there. So again, when we talk about the defense being ahead of the offense, I'm not taking anything away from that side of the ball, but I just think that there are some elements on the offense that are really allowing the defense to be ahead of the offense. We'll see if a week from today we're talking about a whole different scenario for the Sun Devils.
And as we move on to the back half of these spring football practices for ASU, are there any other storylines or aspects about this team that are worth watching out for?
Well, I mean, I guess aside from the obvious quarterback competition, to see if maybe one signal caller is able to just inch ahead of the other, I think that when you look at the offense as a whole, again, we talk about the necessary growing pains that this group had to go through with a new offensive coordinator, with a new offensive scheme. You like to think that by week 3 of spring practice that things are just settling down. Things are slowing down for this group. I mean, look, a week from Saturday, if ASU is going to play their spring game, I think the time to show any kind of progress on this offense, to make this offensive staff feel good about their unit going into fall camp in August, there really has to be some marked improvements starting right here, right now. And I'm really curious to see if we're actually going to see that from the offense. I feel that if the running game is really able to establish itself even more than it has, it really can open up things for the wide receivers. But again, I think just collectively, this group of wide receivers, which again did not receive any help in terms of additions, really has to step up their game. And again, I know it's kind of hard when you have such a heated quarterback competition, when you have two signal callers that are literally getting 50-50 reps. That really does make it hard. But that's something that I think I'm curious to see if that really does show some improvement. Are we seeing some kind of change in storylines, if you will, between now and next week? When it comes to the defense, like I said, the front seven is established. The front seven is playing as well as everybody thought it would be playing. I'm just curious to see if the secondary, if the two deep as it is right now, as I mentioned it earlier, especially the two transfer safeties now finding themselves on the first and second team. Is that something that's here to stay, or is it maybe still an unsettled position battle for that defensive backfield for the Sun Devils? But I think you're the defense. You're not worried about what kind of issues the offense may or may not have. You are definitely the strongest unit on this ASU team. You proved it so far in spring practice, and the last thing you want to do is not end spring practice on even a stronger note that you did start it. So really, if I'm just looking at both sides of the ball, those are some of the storylines that I'm looking for in the last couple of weeks. But the bottom line is that maybe, especially with a lot of the newcomers, they were kind of feeling themselves the first or second week of spring practice. The third week of spring practice, I almost feel like the level of excuses, if you will, that does really decrease. And players that have been brought here with a lot of accolades, have been brought here with a lot of expectations, it's really time for them for this third week of spring practice to really shine and really deliver on those high expectations that the staff members have of them.
Well, thank you for your insight, Hode. For more content surrounding ASU football, comprehensive practice reviews, sights and sounds, pressers, you name it, we got it at DevilsDigest.com, so be sure to check it out. Also drop a follow on Twitter at DevilsDigest. But until then, my name's Nick Borgia. That's Hode Urbino. We're Devil's Digest, and we thank you so much for tuning in.